Hello and welcome to the DVB Newsroom. I'm Nora. Joining me is Debbie Stothard, a human rights activist from Malaysia and the coordinator of ALTSEAN-Burma, a group supporting democracy in Myanmar. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Can we start back in 1996? Why did you establish ALTSEAN-Burma and how has it evolved over the last 29 years?
Well, I was concerned about human rights issues in Southeast Asia. And I noticed that ASEAN governments were collaborating with each other to suppress human rights activism in their respective countries. And when 888 happened, it captured my imagination. I was a student activist, and here was an entire movement of students rising up against the military dictatorship. So it was something that was really important to me. And over the years, I noticed that ASEAN governments were getting closer and closer to the military generals in Burma and also blocking out the democracy movement, the voices. So when it became clear that ASEAN might welcome Burma as a member of ASEAN, it totally freaked me out because I knew it would cause more human rights problems in Burma because the generals will feel more emboldened, but also it would lower human rights standards in ASEAN. And that's why we formed, actually at first we decided we're going to have an ASEAN-based meeting on what's going on in Burma to connect all the different human rights movements and politicians and activists and media with the Burma movement. And we call that the Alternative ASEAN Meeting on Burma. It was held in Bangkok because Thailand was chairing ASEAN at the time. And we wanted to call it Alternative ASEAN Network because we wanted to show the movement in Burma that the position, the anti-human rights, anti-democracy position of ASEAN governments at that time did not reflect the values of the ASEAN people.
What was it that made you want to help the people of Myanmar achieve democracy and human rights?
Well, I would say that I'd always been interested as a child in Burma because I would be able to meet people from different countries in the region, but not people from Burma. Actually, the first time I met someone from Burma was in 1983 when I was a crime reporter in Malaysia and I was covering boat salvage. And on the ship in Port Klang, they said, because every time I went on the ships, I was saying, are there any Burmese on board? Because I knew there were, in that generation, there were many Burmese working on ships. And they said, oh, our engineer is Burmese. Can I go and meet him? And so I went up to the deck and I met him and he was kind of shocked. I said, oh, there's no reason. I just wanted to meet you because I haven't met anyone from Burma before. And I know I'm a reporter, and I'm Malaysian, and I've always had an interest in your country. So it's quite funny that then when we zoom forward to 1988 and this uprising happened, it really captured my imagination because I was back in school, I was back in college as a student human rights activist, and feeling that wow, this is the biggest movement in our generation. It's led by students in our region. And then, of course, Aung San Suu Kyi emerged as a non-violent leader, a woman, and that even made things more compelling for me. But then in the end, it was Burmese food. Burmese food is keeping me in this movement.
Did you continue to operate throughout the democratic transition from military rule to Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy government? If so, how?
Well, we continued to operate because, most people thought, oh, now the Aung San Suu Kyi is free, she's in parliament, it's like a happy ever after situation. But we were working very closely with communities in rural areas, with ethnic minority and religious minority groups, including with LGBT activists. And we realized that the happy ever after might be happening in Bahan or in certain parts of Rangoon, but the income gap was increasing with the urban poor, and the ethnic people had not enjoyed peace. They hadn't enjoyed restoration of their rights. Many people were still denied livelihoods. And so we saw that the human rights challenge was there. It had been moved into a different focus. So we continued to work. During the time of transition, we would sometimes deliver up to 15 capacity building workshops on business and human rights, economics, advocacy for human rights, transitional justice throughout the country. That was how busy we were. But we always kept our office in Bangkok, in Thailand, because we felt that the moment we base ourselves in Yangon, we would be subjected to the kind of economic and political pressures in Yangon that might undermine our principles.
Of course, Aung San Suu Kyi was jailed on February 1st, 2021 during the military coup. How has ALTSEAN-Burma supported the Myanmar people in their resistance to military rule over the last 4 years?
From the very beginning, from February 1st, we were joining hands with so many democratic movements, human rights organizations to denounce the coup. And the first thing that happened was we started the monthly Coup Watch. So every month, ALTSEAN produces the Coup Watch briefer. And that was to help, because so many things were happening around the coup, around Burma, in international community, economically, that there was a huge amount of information. So we wanted to be able to provide a concise and evidence-based overview of what was going on in Burma, and so that everyone can see roughly what's happening throughout the country. So every month, our very hard-working and stressed-out team goes through about 400 reports to produce a 20-page briefer on what's going on in Burma that month. And we've continued to do the advocacy at regional and international level. And in this situation, it's been amazing and inspiring that we don't have to take the lead on this, that we are actually able to provide support to the activists who have become so experienced and so capable, activists from Burma who can speak up for their communities and their movements. So we don't have to actually be out there yelling and screaming. We can provide the support from behind as strategic support. But, you know, it's not just about reacting to what's going on the ground and to the cruelty and the brutality of this military junta. It's also about helping communities develop a blueprint for the future. So one of the things I'm really excited and proud of is the Inclusive Federal Economic Policy Project. And we are going to be launching, we've been working with all the partner organizations to launch this policy in the months ahead. But what we had was 74 different workshops and activities and field consultations in the past 2.5 years. And mostly women and youth, including the LGBTQ+ community and persons with disabilities, actually drafted the over 400 economic policy recommendations. What's really sexy about this is that the participants agreed on an action plan, what they want the new government to achieve within 100 days, within the first year, the second year, and the third year. So it's not just saying we want this. It's actually them coming up with a plan, saying the priorities according to the time, according to the timeline. And that's been really powerful because, you know, women and youth in the country constitute over nearly 80%, over 70% of the population. Over 70% of the population are rural-based people, yet their voices have not and their needs have not been considered in any government of Burma, not even under the NLD government. So if we want to be truly revolutionary, we have to make sure that economic reconstruction and economic development delivers the transitional justice, the economic transitional justice that communities who have been excluded, who have been exploited, who have been oppressed for generations. So that's the great thing. I'm so excited about it. And I'm also excited that in this space, Rohingya young women were working with Burmans, with Shans, with Karenni, with Rakhine, with a whole bunch of different people to develop these policies. But I think the incident that sticks in my memory is colleagues explaining to the youth in Magwe and Sagaing who were doing the field consultations. Ironically, they did all their consultations within deadline. And we're saying, no, tell them to take their time. The place is being attacked every day, so their safety comes first. And the youth replied, this is the future we are fighting for. So they saw the economic future was fundamental to the revolution, and that really moved us, and we just got so inspired to work even harder.
What is your position on jailed State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, who has been held in Naypyidaw since the 2021 coup?
She is an elected person. She is the head of state, and she does not deserve to be jailed. She does not deserve the imprisonment. She needs to be released unconditionally and immediately, along with the more than 30,000 political prisoners in the country, who also include elected members of parliament.
How do you balance supporting the resistance while acknowledging past controversy around her leadership?
I think we need to understand that if we are going to move forward, there has to be an admission of the mistakes of the past and guarantees of rights to restoration of the rights, not only for Rohingya people, but for all the different ethnic people who have been disenfranchised and marginalized systematically. I think this revolution, for me, this phase or this part of the revolution has been extremely moving, because we have seen young leaders coming out and speaking openly and apologizing openly for mistakes of the past. And, ironically, the person from the older generation, the politician, the political leader from the older generation who has ever publicly apologized for mistakes of the past was actually Baba U Tin U, a former general, a former political prisoner, the co-founder of the NLD, who has said in public that he violated rights, he committed bad things when he was in the army following orders, and he apologized, and he said that's why he was willing to dedicate the rest of his life to democracy and human rights. So I think, we do need to also think about revolutionary culture. And revolutionary culture doesn't mean covering up what happened in the past. A revolutionary culture is actually about admitting we all made mistakes, and there are wrongs that need to be righted. And this is how we have to move forward.
How does your organization monitor the situation on the ground in Myanmar? Does it collaborate with the National Unity Government?
One of the things that we have to understand in terms of the post-88 revolutionary period and what's happening now is that people are much more capable and much more connected with the outside world. They have a much bigger perspective. And so we don't have to be on the ground, because there's DVB, there's citizen journalists, there's human rights documenters, people on the ground who are motivated and concerned enough to make sure that the truth gets out. all we have to do is actually go through all the sources and summarize and try and show, develop a concise picture, acknowledging the sources about what's going on. We acknowledge that the NUG government represents the NUG government is much more representative of the people than Min Aung Hlaing's junta could ever be. And I have pointed out in the past that the NUG number of votes represents a bigger majority than many of the Western governments currently in power. So absent a revolutionary government that fulfills all our expectations, the NUG is what we have, and the NUCC, the National Unity Consultative Council, is also the body that we need to support and encourage to move in the right direction in terms of the laws and the policies that we need for the future.
Following the March 28th earthquake, Min Aung Hlaing's regime announced a ceasefire in April. He met with ASEAN Chair Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, who also met with the NUG. How do you think Anwar is handling the crisis in Myanmar?
I think Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, as chair of ASEAN, is playing it safe by meeting both sides. But at some stage, ASEAN has to understand that Min Aung Hlaing is not just making a mockery of ASEAN. He is his junta is actually actively undermining every principle and value that ASEAN officially stands for. And his actions, Min Aung Hlaing's actions, are a direct threat to the stability of the region. And having handshaking photo opportunities and empty dialogues is not going to help ASEAN or the people of Burma. It's just going to prolong the problem. So, you know, we are ASEAN-based human rights activists. We always think, you know, we always work for and in the hope that suddenly ASEAN will grow a spine and start actually acting according to principles instead of sitting on your hands and saying it's complicated. Because in the end, it's ASEAN governments and ASEAN people who are feeling the most negative impact of what Min Aung Hlaing's junta is doing.
It seems ASEAN wants to stick with its 5-point consensus that Min Aung Hlaing agreed to in April 2021, but didn't implement upon his return to Naypyidaw. Do you think there's any potential left in the 5-point consensus, or is it time to abandon it?
To be quite honest, the 5-point consensus became irrelevant within the first year of its adoption by ASEAN. But, you know, ASEAN has a very weak ego. They're very fragile. Firstly, different human rights activists, including Kin Omar and myself, have engaged with officials, and we could see that they are so afraid of even having as a 5-point consensus 2.0. They said not even 1.5. They will not amend it. They will not change it. And when we were wondering, that's illogical. But then we realized the 5-point consensus was the only point in time that ASEAN governments were united. And if they would try to change it, the whole of ASEAN will be split, because ASEAN fundamentally is lacking in unity of values and principles. They all signed papers, but they didn't actually think about it. And also, the UN, the international community, was foolish enough to say, oh, we support ASEAN centrality and support ASEAN to implement the 5-point consensus. So ASEAN got it in their head, oh, we are being praised for the 5-point consensus, we can't throw it away. I think it's time, given the horrific developments since the quake, that the UN Security Council convened a session on Burma, Myanmar, as Tom Andrews, the UN Special Rapporteur, has called for. And at this session, they should officially say that we have to move beyond the 5-point consensus because it's no longer relevant. And so that will be the strong signal to ASEAN governments to stop hanging on to this little dirty rag, irrelevant dirty rag that they are waving like a flag called the 5-point consensus.
Min Aung Hlaing stated to regional leaders, including the Thai and Indian prime ministers, that he's sticking to his regime election plan. How do you feel about this?
Well, you know, it's like the emperor has no clothes. This junta has stable control of only a quarter of the country. What the hell is he thinking? Everybody knows the election is a sham. The parties that won 90% of the seats consistently in 2015 and 2020 have been outlawed and excluded from the election. It's like, you know, Min Aung Hlaing should just also compete for Mr. Myanmar competition, and all the young men and all the fit men will be disqualified so that he wins. That's basically the situation as it stands. And anyone who actually believes this election is going to work, I would like to sell them the Brooklyn Bridge and the Statue of Liberty, because I'm sure they will pay me money for nothing. They can't be that gullible.
The goal of many resistant groups in Myanmar is to create a federal democratic union. Does ALTSEAN-Burma support this initiative?
We definitely support a federal democratic union because it's time to actually have a genuine federalism where all ethnic groups and all people have power over their destiny. At the moment, and even before the coup, Naypyidaw had too much power, where they got the power to make the decisions and the power to get the benefit from those decisions, whereas it was local government and state governments that had to deal with the mess that was created without any resources. So when it came to mining or logging or mega projects, it was the Naypyidaw who made the decision and Naypyidaw who got the money, but the people who were suffering on the ground, they didn't get any benefits, and their local government and state government didn't have the resources to take care of them. So I think, you know, just on that point alone, we do need to ensure that there is genuine federalism, where people, their language, their culture, and their basic economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as their civil and political rights, are respected and protected. Fundamentally, that's been the problem. People kept saying, oh, Burma is very divided, people are fighting with each other, oh, the balkanization situation, blah, blah, blah. But when you look at what's going on, why was this conflict going on in many different places? It's about the fact that people didn't have control over their own land and resources. And the fight for resources is going to get worse the more climate change bites. And so therefore, this is not just about making sure that everyone has their rights. It's actually about federalism is needed because it has to make we need it to make the country more resilient against the effects of climate change, not just to Burma, but to the whole region.
So before we wrap up, is there anything you would like to say to the people of Myanmar?
Hang in there, don't give up. We're not giving up. And what people are doing to resist continually inspires us to keep on working harder.
Thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.